Hi, my name's Eva Robinson, and I'm going to be talking about moderation and mediation. Moderation looks at whether a moderator variable affects the strength of the relationship between a predictor and outcome variable. Moderators specify whether a relation will hold. It can be qualitative or quantitative. In my analysis, the parts of my model include a continuous predictor, a categorical moderator, and a continuous outcome variable. I've also included moderation equations in which the moderation variable is typically an interaction term. So for my first moderation effect, my dependent variable or my outcome variable is going to be the likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse. My predictor variable is athletic ability, and my categorical moderator is going to be gender, in which males are coded as 0 and females are coded as 1. So what am I looking for? I'm looking to see the relationship between my continuous predictor and my continuous outcome variable. I'm also looking to see how gender affects the strength of the relationship between athletic ability and likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse. So the first thing I looked at was the correlation between the uncentered variables and found that athletic ability has a strong relationship with likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse, and gender and the interaction between gender and athletic ability have moderate relationships with surviving the zombie apocalypse. Well, I did conduct a linear multiple regression analysis with the interaction as a predictor, which gave me the main effects and interactions of the model. I'm not especially interested in the uncentered data, so I'm going to move on to the centered data. So before continuing with the analysis, it was very important to mean center the data to avoid having multiclinearity. Additionally, I ran diagnostics and confirmed that we have normality of residuals. They were linear and randomly distributed, and I also found the data to be homoscedastic. First, I looked at the intercept to see if it was significant with athletic ability as a predictor. Then I ran a regression analysis with athletic ability and gender as a predictor, and finally, I looked at the interaction between athletic ability and the levels of gender for main effects and interactions. When I reran the model with the data centered, I saw that the intercept, athletic ability, and gender were good predictors of the likelihood of survival, but the interaction was not significant. So in other words, while athletic ability is a significant predictor of the likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse, gender does not moderate the relationship between zombie survival and athletic ability. While according to this model, females would fare slightly better than males in the zombie apocalypse, there is no moderation. Additionally, by looking at the differences in slope from 0, or B3, I see that the relationship between athletic ability and zombie survival is positive, and that the more athletic you are, the more likely you are to survive. On the left, I included the truth table with the effect highlighted that is seen here, as well as my hand-drawn prediction, which I made by looking at the slope and intercept when gender is coded as 0 and 1. The slope and intercept are not equal to 0, so what I expected the graph to look like does look similar to the plot seen on the right. For my next moderation effect, my dependent variable is still the likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse, and my predictor variable is athletic ability. So my new moderator variable is gun view, so whether or not someone is pro-gun or anti-gun. So I'm looking to see whether gun views affects the strength of the relationship between athletic ability and likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse. So again, I looked at the uncentered data, and I did look at the correlations, and I can see here that my predictor variable is has a strong relationship with my outcome variable, but again, I'm not very interested in the uncentered data, so I'm going to move on. So for my model, again, I ran diagnostics and confirmed we met all the assumptions. And similar to the previous analysis, I ran a regression analysis with athletic ability and now gun opinions as a predictor, and looked at the interaction between athletic ability and the levels of gun opinions to see the main effects. When I reran the model with the data centered, I saw that athletic ability was still a good predictor of survival, but the intercept and gun opinions were not. However, the results do show that the interaction was significant. So in other words, athletic ability is a significant predictor of the likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse, and gun opinions do moderate the relationship between athletic ability and likelihood of survival. However, gun opinions alone are not a significant predictor. Additionally, by looking at the differences in slope from 0, pro-gun individuals more highly moderate the relationship between the predictor than outcome, leading to a better chance of survival than people who are against guns. Again, on the left, you can see my truth table with my hand-drawn prediction, and see that when my predictor or my moderator variable is 0 or 1, the slope is not equal to 0, while that is not the case for my intercept, and therefore it does resemble the actual data. So for my last moderation, my new moderator variable is going to be drug use, so 2 levels, whether or not someone uses drugs or does not use drugs. And I'm looking to see how drug usage affects the strength of the relationship between athletic ability and likelihood of surviving the zombie apocalypse. So again, I looked at the uncentered data, and here I see again that athletic ability is still has a pretty strong relationship with the outcome variable. But I'm going to move on to the centered data. So for my effect 3, again, I ran diagnostics and we met our assumptions. Similar to the previous analysis, I ran a regression analysis with athletic ability and now drug usage as a moderator and looked at the interaction between athletic ability and the levels of drug use to see main effects. When I reran the model with the data centered, I saw that neither the intercept nor drug use or no drug use were good predictors of the likelihood of survival, but that athletic ability was. Additionally, the interaction was not significant. So in other words, while athletic ability is a significant predictor of the likelihood of surviving, drug usage does not moderate the relationship between zombie survival and athletic ability. So here again, I included the truth table with the effect highlighted that is seen here, as well as my hand-drawn prediction, which I made by looking at the slope and intercept when drug usage is coded as 0 or 1. Here the slope is not equal to 0, so what I expected the graph to look like does look similar to the plot on the right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to mediation. Mediation analysis is a type of regression analysis that uses a series of linear regression models in which one of the variables affects a second variable that in turn affects a third variable. The intervening variable, or M, is the mediator. It mediates the relationship between a predictor and an outcome. In the model, paths A and B are called direct effects. The mediational effect in which X leads to Y through M is called the indirect effect. The indirect effect represents the portion of the relationship between X and Y that is mediated by M. While there are many mediation models, I will only be discussing a model with one mediator, which according to Preacher and Hayes, 2008, is referred to as simple mediation. This differs from moderation, which looks at whether a moderator variable affects the strength of the relationship between a predictor and outcome variable. Moving on. So for my mediation effect 1, my outcome variable is the grade percentage received in regression. My predictor variable is time spent studying, and my mediator variable is the speed at which Patrick watches this module. So what am I looking for? Is there a relationship between my continuous predictor variable, time spent studying, and my continuous outcome variable, grade percentage received in regression? Or does the speed at which Patrick watches this module mediate the relationship between my predictor and my outcome? Let's find out. So for my first effect, I followed the steps of Barron and Kenny from the original article. I first ran a linear regression and looked to see if there was a direct effect between time spent studying and the grade percentage received in regression, or path C. I do this to see whether or not time spent studying is a good predictor of the grade percentage received, and as expected, it is. Second, I ran a linear regression and looked at whether there's a relationship between time spent studying and the speed at which Patrick watches the video, and again, I found this to be true. This is important because we want X to affect M. If there wasn't a relationship, the M could just be a third variable that may or may not matter. Finally, I conducted a third regression, multiple linear regression, to look at the relationship between the mediator, predictor variable, and the outcome, so paths B and C prime. I do this specifically to see whether or not the direct effect between my predictor variable and my outcome variable still exists after my mediator has been included in the model. Here I found that there still is an existing relationship between time spent studying and the grade percentage received in regression. The effect was reduced, which we can see by looking at the t-value in the coefficients box. I can conclude from these results that while my mediator, the time Patrick spent watching this module, partially mediates the relationship between time spent studying and my grade received in regression. While testing mediation, even if our statistics tell us that we have failed to rule out mediation, mediation is a causal statement and can only be considered a possible effect in our model. To address this, we can use bootstrapping or the Sobel test. While the Sobel test is essentially a z-score with an associated p-value, it has previously been the most widely used. It is a very conservative test. According to davidkenny.net, the main reason for the test being conservative is that the sampling distribution of AB is highly skewed. Bootstrapping, on the other hand, enables us to better run tests when our statistical power is low. It has also been thought to produce more robust and replicable standard errors for our indirect effects. We bootstrap by sampling from the data set when n is 100 with replacement to get an estimate indirect effect, or A times B. I used 1,000 random samples to conduct an estimated indirect effect. The standard errors were also randomly distributed and are an accurate reflection of the estimated indirect effect. Here we see that 0 does not fall within our 95% confidence intervals, and therefore I reject the null, and I can see that I failed to rule out mediation. For my last mediation effect, I'm still keeping my outcome variable as grade percentage received in regression. My predictor variable is time spent studying, and my mediator now is amount of alcohol consumed by Patrick. So what am I looking for? Does the amount of alcohol consumed by Patrick mediate the relationship between my predictor and my outcome? We're going to find out. So for my mediation effect 2, I again followed the steps by Barron and Kenny. I ran a linear regression and found a significant relationship between grade percentage received in the class and time spent studying on the direct effect. Next, I ran linear regression to see if there was a relationship between time spent studying and the amount of alcohol consumed by Patrick, and found that the relationship was significant. Then I conducted another multiple linear regression to look at the relationship between the mediator, predictor variable, and outcome variable, so paths B and C prime. I do this to see whether or not the direct effect between my predictor variable and my outcome variable, again, has disappeared after my mediator was included in the model. Here I found that the effect of my predictor on my outcome disappeared and is no longer significant. I can conclude from these results that the amount of alcohol fully mediates the relationship between time spent studying and the grade percentage received in regression. So in conclusion, for both of my mediation models, I failed to rule out mediation. Finally, here for the second effect, we see that 0, again, does not fall within our 95% confidence interval, and therefore I reject the null that I failed to rule out mediation. And that's all I have for you, so thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in class.